The First Day of School, Part 1, paragraphs 1 through 23. It's the morning of the first day of school, but this day isn't like any other. What was it like for those first brave students to integrate our schools? 13 bubbles floated in the milk. Their pearl transparent hemispheres gleamed like souvenirs of the summer days just past, rich with blue reflections of the sky and of shadowy greens. John Hawkins jabbed the bubble closest to him with his spoon, and it disappeared without a ripple. On the white surface, there was no mark of where it had been. Stop tooling with that oatmeal and eat it, his mother said. She glanced meaningfully at the clock on the varnished cupboard. She nodded a heavy, empathetic affirmation that now the clock was boss. Summer was over, but summer was over with the gracious oncoming of morning light, and the stir of early breezes promised that time was a luxury. Audrey's not even down yet, he said. Audrey, be down. You think she's taking longer to dress because she wants to look nice today? She likes to look neat. What I was thinking, he said slowly, was that maybe she didn't feel like going today. Didn't feel exactly like it. Of course, she'll go. I mean, she might not want to go until tomorrow, maybe, until we see what happens. Nothing's going to happen, his mother said. I know there isn't, but what if it did? Asked John, swirled. Again, John swirled the tip of his spoon in the milk. It was like writing on a surface that wouldn't keep no mark. Eat and be quiet. Audrey's coming, so let's stop this here kind of talk. He heard the tap of heels on the stairs, and his sister came down into the kitchen. She looked fresh and cool in her white dress. Her lids looked heavy. She must have slept all right, and for this John felt both envy and a faint resentment. He had not really slept since midnight. The heavy traffic in town, the long wails of horns as somebody raced in on the U.S. highway holding the horn button down, and the restless murmur like the sound of celebration down in the courthouse square. He kept him awake after that. Each time a car had passed their house, his breath had gone tight and sluggish. It was better to stay awake and ready, he had told himself, than to be caught asleep. Daddy gone? Audrey asked softly as she took her place across the table from her brother. It's been gone for an hour, their mother answered. You know what time he has to be at the mine? She means, did he go to work today? John said. His voice had risen patiently. He met his mother's stout gaze in a staring contest, trying to make her admit by at least some flicker of expression that today was different than any other day. I thought he might be down at Reverend Spector's, John said. Cal's father and Vinny and some of the other are going to be there to wait and see. Maybe his mother smiled then. If so, the smile was so faint that he could not be sure. You know, your father isn't much of a hand for waiting, he said. Eat. It's 8:15. As he spooned the warm oatmeal into his mouth, he heard the ray crow calling again from the trees beyond the railroad embankment. He had heard it since the first light came before dawn and had thought, maybe the bird knows it's going to rain after all. He hoped it would. They wouldn't come out in the rain. he had thought. Not so many of them, at least. He could wear a raincoat. A raincoat might help him feel more protected on the walk to school. It might be a sort of disguise, at least. But since dawn, the sun had lain across the green Kentucky trees and the roofs of town like a clean, hard fire. The sky was as clear as fresh washed window glass. The rain crow was wrong about the weather. And still, John thought, its laminating, repeating call must mean something. His mother and Audrey were talking about the groceries she was to bring when she came home from school at lunch: a 5-pound bag of sugar, fresh pineapple, and a pound of butter. Listen, John said. Downtown, the sound of sirens had begun. A volley of automobile horns broke around it as if they meant to drown it out. Listen to them. It's only the National Guard, I expect, his mother said calmly. They came in early this morning before light, and it may be foolish, kids honking at them the way they would. Audrey, if Henry doesn't have a good looking roast, why then let it go? And I'll walk out to Vera's this afternoon and get one there. I want to have something a little bit special for our dinner tonight. So John thought, she wasn't asleep last night either. Someone had come stealthily to the house to bring his parents word that about the National Guard. That meant they knew about the others who had come into town, too. Maybe all through the night, there had been a swift passage of messengers through the neighborhood and a whisper of information that his mother meant to keep from him. Your folks told you, he reflected bitterly, that nothing is better than knowing whatever there is in this world to be known. That was why you had to be one of the half dozen of kids out of some 900 colored kids of school age were going to school to start classes at Joseph P. Gilmore High instead of Webster. Knowing and learning the truth were worth so much, they said, and then left it to the hooting rain crow to tell you that things were worse than everybody had hoped.